The cell wall is very important because transport of substances has to take place from this cell to the neighboring cell and all that. For that cell to cell interaction, cell wall is very important. What is the plant cell wall made up of? Plant cell wall is also made up of cellulose. They have hemicellulose, pectins, and they have proteins. The main function of the cell wall is to provide rigidity and support to the cell, because cell wall, it forms the outermost covering, therefore it is quite rigid and it maintains the proper shape of the cell, supporting the cell. Hello everyone, a warm welcome to the session on class 11th biology for CBSE. I'm Dr. Divya, biology faculty, Vidhyaashram School of Excellence, Mysuru. So in this session, let us talk about the cell wall in eukaryotes, wherein we know that in eukaryotes, again, only the plants have the cell wall, whereas in animals, they do not have a cell wall. So we'll study about the structure and function of the cell wall in plants and then learn some of the important MCQs that can be framed under this particular topic. So talking about the cell wall in the previous session, we had learnt about the plasma membrane, right? Wherein the plasma membrane, next to the cytoplasm, is the covering which is called as the plasma membrane, which is selectively permeable in nature, wherein it allows only certain substances to enter into and out of the cell. So now this plasma membrane is covered by one more layer in the case of plant cells, that is in algae and all that, wherein in the case of animal cells, they do not have a cell wall. Instead, it is the outermost covering is the plasma membrane alone. But the plants, be it the fungi, be it the algae and all that, they have an outer covering which is called as the cell wall. And that outer covering is nothing but the covering present above the plasma membrane. So this is the cell wall. So we'll study about this cell wall, how it looks, what is its structure and all that. So talking about the function of the cell wall gives a proper shape to the cell, because it is just like how we have a skeleton in our body. Imagine we didn't have a skeleton, what would have happened? We would just be like a bed sheet, right, with no proper shape, or just like a cloth piece which is dropped on the floor, no proper shape and nothing. It is that skeleton that holds the different holds our body like this, how we are looking today. Same way, the proper shape. Imagine if this cell wall was not there, the cytoplasmic content, which is a fluid matrix, again, which is fluid in nature, it would just be like a drop, right? There would not be a proper shape like this as you see here. So therefore, it gives a proper shape to the cell. Apart from that, it protects the cell from any mechanical damage, and also it protects the cell from infection. That is, any pathogen entering into the cell first has to traverse the cell wall. Only if the cell wall is damaged, then only the pathogen can enter. Otherwise, it is very difficult for any pathogen or harmful microorganisms to enter into the cell. Therefore, their main function is to protect the cell from mechanical damage, like how in our body we have the outermost covering, that is the derma, that is the epidermis or the skin, right, which protects our body from infectious substances and mechanical damage. Same way, the cell wall in the case of plants and fungi, they protect that particular organism from mechanical damage and infection by various pathogens, or from the entry of various pathogens into the cell. Next, it helps in cell-to-cell interaction. Cell-to-cell interaction means in plants or in animals, we know that, especially in plants, because we are talking about cell wall here, there are numerous cells that are present here, right? The same thing here also, it will continue here also. So there has to be an interaction between this cell with that of this cell with this and all that, right? So each of the cells, which neighboring cells, have to interact with each other. For that, the cell wall is very important, because transport of substances has to take place from this cell to the neighboring cell and all that. For that cell to cell interaction, cell wall is very important. And apart from that, the cell wall provides a barrier for undesirable macromolecules. So those molecules which are larger in size, they are prevented from entering into the cell or passing through the plasma membrane by these cell walls. So cell wall not just protects the cell from infectious agents or from mechanical damage. Apart from that, it also protects the cell from the unwanted macromolecules that are there. So these are the functions of the cell wall. So cell wall has to be quite rigid when compared to the plasma membrane. We had learned in the previous session, right? The plasma membrane had quasi-fluid nature, right? It was quite fluid in nature, but the cell wall is not fluid in nature. It is quite rigid because it forms the outermost covering. So therefore, the outermost covering has to be quite rigid if it has to protect the cellular content. So that is a function of the cell wall. Next, moving further, let's study about the algal cell wall. So algal cell wall, what is they made up of? The cell wall, it is nothing but made up of different components, right? So in plasma membrane, we had studied wherein it is made up of carbohydrates. It is made up of a lipid bilayer, that is phospholipids. It is made up of phospholipid bilayer, carbohydrates, proteins, to some extent cholesterol and all that. Similarly, here also the cell wall, here the algal cell wall, the cell wall of algae, it is made up of, that is your Rhodophyceae, Phaeophyceae and Chlorophyceae members. They are made up of cellulose, they contain galactans, they contain mannans, and all that, they are some carbohydrates itself, and they contain minerals like calcium carbonate. Some of the algae which live in the oceans, that is the kelps and all that, which we call, they contain calcium carbonate as well. So this is the components present in the cell wall of algae. Moving further, what are the components present in the cell wall of plants? We shall look into. So are we studying the components present in the cell wall of animals here? No. Why? Because animals, always remember, animals lack a cell wall. Though they come under eukaryotes, the main difference between a plant cell and an animal cell is that animal cells have a plasma membrane, but they do not have a cell wall. Always you need to remember that. So what is the plant cell wall made up of? Plant cell wall is also made up of cellulose. They have hemicellulose, pectins, and they have proteins. Say for example, apple. The cell wall of apple contain lot of pectins. So it's like that. So they're made up of cellulose, hemicellulose, pectins and proteins. And the cell wall of young plants. So young plants usually, they have a primary cell wall. Later on, the primary cell wall will get converted into a secondary cell wall as they mature. So a young plant cell, the primary cell wall has a particular function. It helps in the growth of the plant, and the primary cell wall is not that rigid when compared to the secondary cell wall because it needs to help in the growth of the plant. So if the plant growth means the cell needs to elongate, and if the cell wall is quite rigid, the cells cannot elongate. So that is the reason. And the primary cell wall in young plants, they're capable of growth, and as and when the cells grow and mature, this primary cell wall will be disintegrated. It will just vanish, and in that place, the secondary cell wall will be formed. That is, inner towards the primary cell wall, the secondary cell wall will get formed. And this secondary cell wall, it contains the middle lamella, and this middle lamella, what it is made up of? It is made up of calcium pectate. Mainly the middle lamella that is there, it is. So we have the primary cell wall which forms the outermost layer, as you can see here. This primary wall where it is present in the young cells, that young cells where it will be present in the young plants. As and when the cells mature, these primary wall will get disintegrated, and towards the inner of the primary wall, the secondary wall will get formed. Now, apart from having the primary and the secondary wall, they have a layer which is called as the middle lamella. And what is that middle lamella made up of? It is mainly made up of calcium pectate. It is made up of calcium pectate. So that is the composition. All this can come for MCQs. And this calcium pectate is very, very important because it glues the different neighboring cells together. So this middle lamella, what it contains calcium pectate. So whatever cells are there in the neighboring, they have to be almost close to each other. There should be some glue, right? So the main function of the calcium pectate is to glue all the cells together, whatever neighboring cells are there, to hold them together or to glue them together. And in between the cell wall and middle lamella, there are some structures which are called as plasmodesmata. So the main function of the plasmodesmata, so these that we see here, these are called as they're channels. Plasmodesmata. So plasmodesmata is present mainly on the cell wall, and it connects the neighboring cells, one cell with the other, and it acts as channels wherein the contents of one cell can move into the other through this plasmodesmata. So for that, it is very, very important. Plasmodesmata are very important for connecting the neighboring cells. So that is a function. So that where it is found in the cell wall. Plasmodesmata are nothing but the extensions of the cell wall itself. So now we know about the structure of the cell wall. We got to know that what is the composition of the algal cell, what the plant cell contains, and in the plant cell there is something called as middle lamella, what it is made up of, all that we studied. And in the cell wall there are some interconnections which connect one cell wall with that of the other. Those connections are called as plasmodesmata, all that we know, right? So now we'll learn some of the MCQs under this particular topic. So which of the following is not a component of the plant cell wall? So plant cell wall is made up of, we'll just brush up. So we had learned, right? It is made up of cellulose, hemicellulose, pectins and proteins. So what it is made up of? Hemicellulose, cellulose, pectin and protein. Now we have to find out here in the given options, which of the following is not a component of plant cell wall? Cellulose, yes, it is a component of plant cell wall. Pectin, yes, it is a component. Chitin, protein is a component. Chitin is a component? No, you don't find chitin in plant cells. You find chitin in arthropods, wherein their exoskeleton is made up of chitin, right? And chitin to some extent can be found in fungi also. So here chitin is not an option. Therefore, the right answer here is option C. Because chitin you don't find it in plant cell wall, and majorly the plant cell wall is made up of cellulose, that you have to remember. So the next question, the primary function of the cell wall is to, so we have to find out the main function. Regulate movement of substances into and out of the cell. The cell wall actually prevents the entry of certain substances, macromolecules and harmful pathogen into the cell. But they don't take care of which substance has to enter, which substance has to go out. No, that is the function of the plasma membrane. So therefore, this option needs to be eliminated. Provide rigidity and support to the cell. Yes, the main function of the cell wall is to provide rigidity and support to the cell, because cell wall, it forms the outermost covering. Therefore, it is quite rigid and it maintains the proper shape of the cell, supporting the cell. So the cell wall of algae is made up of. So we have learned the cell wall of plant cell wall, what it is made up of. So algae, it is again cellulose they will have, then they will have galactans, then they have mannan, and they have calcium carbonate. Cellulose is there. Chitin, no. Peptidoglycan, glycogen, no. So therefore, any of the option can be given here. The cell of algae is made up of, here cellulose is there in this option. So option A is the right answer here. So option A, it is the one that we have to choose here. So in this place, galactan can also be given, mannans also can be given, calcium carbonate also can be given. All the three if they give also, that is the right answer. But in this option, because cellulose is given, I have chosen cellulose here. Next question. The cell wall provides protection against mechanical stress, environmental changes, pathogen attack, all the above. We had studied the function of the cell wall, right? What was the function of the cell wall? The cell wall, because it is rigid, it gives mechanical strength. It gives a proper shape to the cell. It prevents the pathogen from entering into the cell, and also it prevents macromolecules from entering into the cell. So therefore, all the options are correct here. So therefore, option D, all the above is the right answer for this. Next question. Which of the following organism lacks a cell wall? Bacteria, fungi, algae, animal cells. It is animal cells which lack a cell wall. Bacteria, they have a cell wall. Fungi, they do have. Algae also have. It is the animal cells which do not have a cell wall. So next question, the cell wall is located. So we have to find out where exactly the cell wall is present. So is it outside the plasma membrane, surrounding the nucleus, within the cytoplasm, inside the mitochondria? So drawing a simple typical cell, outer we have the cell wall, inner to the cell wall is the plasma membrane, or the cell membrane. So therefore, the cell wall is located outside the plasma membrane. Option A is the right answer here. Surrounding the nucleus is the nuclear membrane. Within the cytoplasm, no. Inside the mitochondria, no. Mitochondria also have their own membrane, but it is the foldings that are there. So these three options are wrong. Therefore, the right option is option A, outside the plasma membrane. The next question. The middle lamella in cell wall is mainly composed of. So we had studied, right? So that the middle lamella that is there, wherein it continues to form the plasmodesmata. So the middle lamella is made up of what compound? Is it calcium pectate, lignin, cellulose, hemicellulose? Cellulose, hemicellulose and all that are present in the plant cell wall. But this middle lamella in the plant cell wall is mainly made up of calcium pectate. So therefore, option A is the right answer here. Next question. The connectivity between the cytoplasm of neighboring cells. So we had learned in the session, right, that 2 to 3 neighboring cells are interconnected to one another through channels which are called as plasmodesmata. So primary wall is present in the younger plants. Middle lamella is present in the cell wall. It is a layer in the cell wall. Plasma membrane, that is innermost layer. And plasmodesmata is the channel-like connections that that arises from the middle lamella, that is from the cell wall, which connects one cell with that of the neighboring. So the connectivity between the cytoplasm of neighboring cells is called plasmodesmata, or it is by plasmodesmata. Option D is the right answer here. So this was about the session wherein you learned about the cell wall, the functions of the cell wall, and also the structure and what is it composed of. That is especially the algal cell and the plant cell in general. What are the components present in the cell wall? All that we got to know, and also we learned some of the MCQs under this. So I hope you understood the session well. We shall meet again in the coming session, taking up a new topic and discussing the possible MCQs under it. Thank you.